So, what we're going to explore today is whether or not there is a crisis in UK democracy, and in particular with regards to participation and the way in which we are represented in the UK. So, as a general rule, general election turnouts have been higher than they currently are. So, for much of the 20th century, the general election turnout was significantly higher than it is today. So at its high point in 1950, 84% of the UK population voted. At its lowest point in 2001, only 59% of people voted. Now that may be because 1950 was a very tight, very close election. 2001, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that Labour were going to be returned to office with a huge parliamentary majority. And since 2001, we have seen a steady increase in voter turnout. So in 2017, for example, that turnout reached 69%. However, it did dip away a little bit in 2019, down to 67%. This is still below the 1918 to 2017 average though, which is round about 73%. So does turnout affect how democratic the United Kingdom is? One argument which would argue that it does is that when there is a low turnout, it undermines what is known as the government's mandate. And a mandate is basically the legitimacy that a government has in order to rule. So it's been argued that there's something of a democratic deficit in the United Kingdom. So what we're referring to with this term democratic deficit is an apparent lack of democratic principles within democratic institutions. So in other words, we can see this straight away with the House of Lords most explicitly, most clearly, because it is unelected. But within the House of Commons as well, what we see is governments are formed that do not have the support of a majority of voters. So I mentioned earlier the 2019 general election was won, of course, by Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party. They won 56% of the seats in the House of Commons. They won 365 out of 650 seats. That is 56% of the seats, but they only won 44% of the votes that were cast. So only 44% of the 67% of people who bothered to vote voted for the Conservatives, yet they have a very comfortable majority and a mandate to rule the country. Many would argue only 44% of people voting them shouldn't give them that mandate. So it raises this question in the UK: if we have government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Okay, so participation, though, it's not just about voting in elections. We have, as I've mentioned, apart from 2019, but that could be explained because it was a winter general election. We have had increase in turnout. We've also had high turnout in referendums when they have been called. We've also had high levels of engagement in politics, and in particular through those referendums. So the turnout, for example, has been higher. In the 2016 EU referendum, turnout was about 72%. In the Scottish independence referendum, it was close to 85%. So there are high turnouts in referendums. But this brings us to one important case, an important Supreme case, the Gina Miller case. And what we're going to do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to send you an article on the Gina Miller case, because what the Gina Miller case did was it highlighted the fact that referendums are advisory and governments can go against the result of a referendum if they choose to. And this is why we had many people arguing that there was a democratic crisis when parliaments failed to deliver on the 2016 EU referendum and pull the UK out despite the referendum saying that we should.